Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to Neurodivergent Faith. I'm glad you've taken the time to join us today. And today I'm excited to be joined by a special guest. His name is John Fela, and he calls himself a special needs dad. And we're going to unpack some of his story and his identity today. So, John, welcome. I'm really glad that you're here on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks, Josh.
You've carried that title, Special Needs Dad. It's a name that sounds both personal and also is shared by a lot of other people who walk a similar road. And I'd love today to just sit with you in that identity a little bit and hear about how fatherhood has unfolded for you across different seasons and the wisdom you've received from your son, Christopher, and the ways that your faith has been stretched all along the way. So let's jump in if we could. Can you take us back to the early years of when you became a special needs dad? What was it like in those early years with Christopher, discovering who he was and his uniqueness and his diagnosis? What was that like for you?
In the early years, when we first got his diagnosis, and really like a lot of families, I will tell you that when he was born in 2007. He was premature by 5 weeks. There were, some small concerns in terms of just some things we were seeing. We just kind of dismissed it to him being, let's say, like a colicky baby child, that type of thing.
Sure.
It really wasn't until his 18th month checkup, as with most kids in our situation, where you take them to the pediatrician, they do their battery of questions, and I always remember that the pediatrician asked us the question, "Is he talking?"
Mm,
And now, to be fair, my son's mom, my ex-wife now, we were educators, right? We were teachers. That was our profession, but this was our first child. We
sure.
didn't know what we didn't know.
Of course.
So, she said, "Is he talking?" And our response was, "Well, not really. There's a little babbling, but there's not really like syllabization. There isn't, any of this like echolalia, kind of stuff and whatever." And she said, "Okay, well, there might be a problem.
Mm,
So what you do is you take him across the street to the professional building and have him see a speech therapist." And her literal words were, "I don't know what they do, but they play with the kids and they make them talk." So see,
okay.
have him see the speech therapist. We said, "Great, all our problems are solved." And of course, we did that, and they weren't solved. He wasn't speaking,
Mm,
right? And then we had hearing tested out fine, and then we went through what in Illinois is referred to as early intervention services, where if your child is under the age of 3, you can basically get free therapy in the home. And they couldn't diagnose him with anything, but they worked with him and said, "Yeah, we think developmentally there's something here." And then right around the age of 3-ish, he was diagnosed with, at the time, what was called pervasive developmental disorder, which now is really just all autism. It's all autism spectrum. And I would tell you that we started on our journey and doing all of the therapies. You name it, we've tried it or at least looked at it. And, I don't just mean the traditional ABA speech therapy, PTOT. He did things like, speech therapy in a pool
Welcome
because
to
water was a big
Neurodivergent Faith,
motivator for him. He
a
loved water.
podcast to
He's
help you
done equine
navigate the
therapy.
beautiful
He's
and
done some
complicated
Special Olympic
intersection of
stuff and,
neurodivergence and
Special
Christian
Olympics
faith and
karate and
practice.
swimming and all
Whether
and,
you're
and all these things.
neurodivergent yourself or you're a
But
friend, family member,
what
or church
transpired in
leader
our
seeking to
marriage, and
understand
specifically
more
for
about the
me, that I think
neurodivergent
is something
Christian
that a lot of parents
experience,
and a lot of families
you're in
can
the right
resonate
place.
with, which is the
My
fact
name's
that
Josh Davis. I'm autistic,
as our son got
ADHD,
older,
a spiritual
within those
director,
first
and an
few years of
ordained
life, and
pastor, and I'm delighted to have
whether
you
it
join me
was
as we
before
explore the
the
unique
formal
ways
diagnosis and then
neurodivergent
after,
people experience God,
we started
worship,
to notice that
community,
our,
and
our marriage
scripture,
and our family
along with
started
special
to come under
interests,
quite a bit of
sensory and
stress, right?
attention
Which is
differences,
the experience of
social and
most families.
communication
But
challenges,
what was
and
also
much
unique
more.
was that what I saw for
Together,
myself as
we'll break down
the husband and
barriers,
father
confront
was my
misconceptions and
son's mom, my
assumptions, and
ex,
celebrate the beautiful
was,
diversity of God's
very
creation in all of
type
us.
A,
So,
organized,
if you're ready to
great
think
with
deeply and
managing
creatively
doctors,
to
insurance,
reconcile your
therapists,
faith
all
and
of
your
these
brain
things,
wiring, or you
total,
just want to hear what
teacher
it
in the
sounds like when
brain, and
neurodivergence
she's
and
still very good
Christianity
at
have a
this.
conversation, come on
But
in.
she managed those
It's a bit
things. She
messy,
liked doing that.
definitely
That was her
interesting,
thing.
and we wouldn't have it any
But
other
then
way.
I didn't really know
We don't do
what my
small
role
talk
was,
here,
right?
so
Because, I
let's jump
certainly
into
helped
something
support our son in
real,
terms of,
raw,
yes, we'll
and
take him to the
robust.
appointments, we'll take him
Are
to
you
the
ready?
therapies, we'll talk with,
Take a
the
deep
doctors
breath,
or whatever. But she was really kind of
hold
steering
it,
the ship.
and let it
Now,
out with a
my
sigh.
experience of talking to a lot of dads in my
All right,
situation and a lot of
here we go.
families all over is for a lot of guys, not all, but for a lot, the knee-jerk reaction is to just kind of throw yourself into your work, meaning we are now in a place in our lives where we have a lot on the table and somehow we need to pay for them. How do we do that? Well, I'm just going to work extra hard and I'm going to be a great husband and father because I am just going to work myself to the bone, make sure we can pay for all those things. But then of course, what's the collateral damage from that?
Right.
You're checked out emotionally, you're exhausted and rightfully so because you're working yourself to the bone. But you're exhausted, you're checked out emotionally, you may be checked out, physically if you're just literally not there in the home. And the marriage suffers, the relationship with the child suffers, it all just starts to break down. Now, what was interesting in my experience though was the fact that I was actually not the breadwinner. Even though my ex and I were both teachers, she always made more money than me. So
Hmm.
even if I wanted to write that blank check, I couldn't, right?
Yeah.
So I had asked myself, what was my value? What was my
Wow.
value and what was my purpose? What did I actually do here? So I learned the hard way, and then also going through a season of life when our son was probably about 4 or 5, when everything just collapsed. I had a job loss. Financially, we were in a very deep dark hole. We almost lost our home, almost lost the marriage. Just whatever could go wrong did. And so what I learned very quickly was I didn't have any community, right? And I actually tell a great story about this in a lot of my presentations. I call it a tale of two parking lots. Okay, so it's a tale of two parking lots. Obviously, it involves two parking lots, but it's because I found myself in different seasons of life sitting in a parking lot, just kind of scratching my head or pulling my hair out, however you want to describe it. And okay, now what? Now what do I do? So in the summer of 2012, which was right in the middle of this really challenging season, we were attending a church at the time, and there was a men's group. Okay, there was a men's group that would meet on Friday evenings. And I was early for it, but I was sitting in the car. I called a couple of friends, like two of my oldest friends. And they were married, but they didn't have kids yet. And I'm just kind of unpacking all this for them, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
guys, look, this is what I'm going through. I don't know what to do. And they're coming back at me with like, dude, we love you, but I we can't help you. We don't know. We don't even know where to begin.
We don't know how to be fathers, much less fathers of a special needs kid and all that you have to deal with, right?
Absolutely. So, and one of my friends actually said, you know what, based on everything you described, if it were me, I would just walk away. And I'm like, well, I can't do that. But they said, we're here for you. Okay. And then I go into this men's group, right? Now, here was the thing. I was in my late 30s at the time. I was easily the youngest person there. Most of these guys, 20, 30 years my senior. And so, of course, I'm expecting I'm going to get some sage wisdom. I'm going to get some guys who are going to come around me and lift me up and all that. And we kind of do our thing at the beginning where we kind of go around the circle and share. And so I share everything that's going on, which they may have known a little bit about, but not to the full extent. And after I shared, the room was quiet. Could
Mm.
hear a pin drop for about a good maybe 30 seconds or a minute. And then finally the group leader chimes in and says, so that's tough. That's really hard. We're sorry to hear that, but what you need to know is that it's going to be okay. If you are a person in real crisis, that's the last thing you want to hear. Oh,
Mhm.
it's going to be okay. Now, do I believe it's going to be okay, especially in the sense of being a person of faith and believe
Sure.
in all these things? Of course. I should add at the time that when I said we were going to a church, we really didn't even identify as Christian yet.
Okay.
I did not consider myself a person of faith or saved. We were really in a place where we were just kind of like grasping at straws and like, we'll try anything. You know what? We don't have a church community. We don't have, anything we're connected with. Let's at least try it, right?
Sure.
Turns out that was probably the wrong church to try, but whatever. But the fact is that I learned very quickly I had no community. I had no one who really understood what I was going through. I had family, I had friends, but no one really understood, right? So I learned the hard way right there. I had to either find community or I had to make it myself. And I will tell you the way my story impacts, I did both. And it certainly didn't happen overnight. And there was a process to it. But the fact is that it wasn't until I really kind of got whacked on the head with this realization that I don't have anybody. And once I could at least admit that to myself, then I could start to say, okay, how can I intentionally put myself out there, right? Literally with the intention of trying to save my family, save myself and the family, just keep us together for one more day. If I can do that, then that's success, and anything else is gravy on top.
Hmm. It sounds really brave because it's got to be a really isolating, lonely experience to be walking through this and then to look around and realize, wait, I don't have anybody who can support me through this. And then my options are, well, I could walk away, but I can't. I've decided I'm not going to do that. So then you just bravely go out and begin to find and create community. I don't know a lot of people who would have done that, to be honest. What do you think motivated you to make that move? Like, why make that move rather than turning over and giving up?
Well, for me, I think in that place, one, giving up just wasn't an option. Now, I am very transparent about this, that this was without question the lowest point in my life.
Yeah.
And I do often share, in my interviews and things, I was suicidal, quite honestly,
Mm.
to the point where I had the letters written. Obviously, I didn't do anything, but
Yeah.
I was at that place.
Yeah.
And I just got to a point where I said, you know what, I don't know how to get out of this, but I know I can't give up. Now, this is also where, and again, we can unpack the faith piece as well, but a big part of it for me again was
Mm.
coming to faith in Christ, and seeing myself, again as a Christian. And so there was a lot of support that just kind of came out of me going on that road and going on that journey. But in a more just kind of practical, kind of everyday life sense, for me, a lot of it was okay. Where do I find this, and how do I find it, and how do I create it? Now, what I will say, and this is the advice that I also give people when they ask me, like, how do you do this? I say, start out small, start out intentionally, and really just look for things that are kind of just right in your own neighborhood. So for me, it was really just when we were kind of going through this very challenging season. One of the things that we had also realized was that our son's school situation was not meeting his needs. So we moved. We lived in a northern suburb of Chicago, so we moved to a different town that had an excellent school district, and we said whatever it takes to get us in there, we'll do that, and we were able to, and it was great. But I just started connecting with people, in the community, and families that went to my son's school, and his mom, my wife at the time, did the same. And that was very successful, because again, we kind of had a built-in community of families that were in a similar experience like us. They, in many cases, a lot of them had done what we had done in terms of moving specifically to that area for
Mm.
those services. That we were all kind of sharing some of the same experiences as well. So it was a great place to kind of slowly spread your wings, so to speak. But then I tried things like, for example, and I want to emphasize here that not everything works the first time, but I had said, you know what, why don't we do, like a dad support group, right? Because my wife actually had a mom support group, and when I started it, I will tell you that. We met at like a local sports bar, and I got maybe like 10 guys that all were from my son's school the first time, And it was great. It was a great time. And then I tried it again, and I had three guys show up. And then the next time I had two, and then I stopped doing it.
Mm.
Now, here was the thing. A few years later, I tried it again. Same place, but this time I had connected with dads through a Facebook group, a special needs Facebook group for dads. And there was actually a similar kind of a support group that met in the southwest suburbs from where I lived. So it was about an hour away. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not necessarily going to travel to that, but I can be in a Facebook group. And then through the Facebook group, I met guys closer to me. And then we got it going again. And now I'm proud to say that group has been going on now for like the last 8 years.
Wow.
Um, but that's where I say that you can start out slowly and intentionally, but then eventually I said, okay, now we need to branch out a little further. Well, social media is great for that. And again, you don't have to join a million groups, but if you intentionally find groups that kind of fit, okay, maybe this is my child's condition, this is my child's age, this is the area we live in. Hey, great, you know what? And again, I found the right guy. It was another guy I connected with who said, "Hey, I would love to do this." I'm like, "Awesome, let's go for it." And there you go. And so that group is just one example of a small way that I've seen this unfold in my life. But at the same time, then that intentionality with the community then led to also more and bigger opportunities down the road.
So one of the things I'm hearing is that the first season of fatherhood for you had a lot of questions, a lot of confusion, desperation, and then you began to develop some support and connect with other people. But as you were starting your fatherhood journey, you said you really struggled to figure out, okay, what do I bring to the table here? What do I have to offer my son, our family? I don't want to just go out and be the breadwinner and pour myself into work and not be present here. So, how did that develop as Christopher grew up and sort of in those younger elementary school years? What rhythms or responsibilities started to shape your days then?
So what I will tell you is that on the one hand, so even when he was very young, and even when we had first started the whole therapy journey and seeing doctor specialists, etc., my kind of attitude towards it was whatever he needs, great, I'll be there, right? Hands down, no question.
Mm.
And that's great. And that's great. And I will tell you that most of the dads and men I know have that same attitude. But again, the issue was, especially in the early days, was that my wife was doing all of this stuff. And part of what was going on for me inside was the fact that, there's some guilt there. That, boy, she's doing all this work. I should be doing something here. If I'm not doing this or that or making all this money, then I at least, whatever she needs from me, the second she asks it, I just drop everything and go. Now, again, I would do anything for my son. But what you learn very quickly, though, is this is how animosity can grow in the marriage
Mm.
because what happens? We're not taking care of ourselves, right? And this is where self-care comes in, and it's so vital and important because what happens, and I really felt this, especially when my son was very young, because my son was the type of a child who would get into these very repetitive activities when he would play, for example. He like if you put him outside, he would, zip all over the playground. But if he played at home a lot of times, he might just be playing in a stimming fashion, in one spot in the house or playing with his favorite toy. And you might be watching him because literally someone always needs to be watching him, but you could be watching him for a couple hours
Yeah.
and okay, this is great connection, on one level, but on the other level, you can get burned out very quickly, right? Or if my wife, for example, had, even though she was a teacher, she had a job on the side she would do on the weekends. So a lot of times I had him on the weekends, which was great. We had a marvelous time. But again, if I don't have the inner reserves emotionally, physically, spiritually, then I can't be present with my son. And then what's going to happen? We're going to get a little bit of this guilt here and like, hey, you know what? I had him all weekend and, I need to go have a break too, kind of a thing. And in the early days, it was like, how dare you ask for a break, right?
Mm.
Because, I'm doing all this, so you better, carry your load kind of a deal. So what we learned once we once we kind of got our family back on kind of solid footing, is that we did counseling with a very, very strong marriage counselor. She was excellent. And one of the things that she really advised us to do, and this is big advice that I have for a lot of for any married couple, quite honestly, but especially when you have disability, is you have to create a calendar. Now, most of us think, sure, I've got a calendar. I know when my kid's going to this school activity or therapy or the doctor. And I'm like, yeah, you need that. Obviously, that's a given. What I'm talking about is structuring your time so that guess what? Mom has 2 or 3 days a week when she has free time. She
Right.
has self-care time. Again, we were both teachers. Sometimes we just needed time to do work or grade or something. But regardless, your time was your time. You want to go work out? Great. You want to go meet your buddy for coffee or a beer? Great. You want to go do something, whatever your thing is. Okay. But that's your time. Now you can negotiate, hey, you know what? Can I switch a Tuesday for a Friday or something? But at the end of the day, you are allowed that time so that you can be recharged and you can be present, and same thing for your partner. And it doesn't get into this conversation about, well, I did more so I get 4 days and you get two. No, this is equal. We can agree on, let's say, a date night when we're together, and that's also another important thing that I always promote with families is, in order to keep the marriage on solid footing, you guys have to be connecting as a married couple too. You need your own self-care, but then you also need that time together as
Right.
well.
Right.
So by doing that, we really, allowed ourselves to create a space where, okay, now when I had my son, I could be fully present. And you know what? It was great. So that I think was something we had to get really, again, intentional about. Intentionality is a big word I use in this, in this realm, because we had to see what we needed to be fully present and engaging with him. And then, of course, as he got older, it looked very much the same in terms of, again, taking him to all of the therapies and all of the things. But at the same time, and I talk to dads about this too, because a lot of time dads have an issue, and I think especially when it's male kids, because guys often think their son is going to grow up and like all the same stuff I do, or all the same sports I do, or we'll go hunt and fish, or whatever your thing is. And in my son's case, that ain't happening, right? But I did have to find those spaces where I could connect with him. So as it turns out, I watch sports on TV. He likes watching sports with me. He gets excited when we watch basketball or football. So you know what? He's never gonna, play sports in high school or college. He's never gonna be on some travel team or whatever. But you know what? We could shoot hoops in the driveway.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what it looks like or how bad it looks or whatever, cling the ball on the rim, and he thinks that's great.
Yeah.
But again, it's that point of connecting. It's that connection point. And that's the bottom line, is that it's not going to look the way I thought it would or wanted it to, but that's still my child. I
Yeah.
can still figure out a way to connect them. It's going to look different, but connection is the key there.
Yeah. It's not going to look the way I thought it would, or even that I wanted it to, but this is still my child. And how can I find a way to connect? That's powerful. What cultural or personal ideals of fatherhood have you had to release? And what new understandings may have come along the way of what it means to be a dad? There's so much messaging, right? About what it looks like to be a dad, or what you should expect of your son or your daughter. But what have you had to release, and what new understandings have come along the way for you?
So for me, I think it's a little unique because, and I didn't share this yet, but my son is an only child. I'm an only child. His bio mom is an only child.
Hmm.
So in a lot of families like ours, typical siblings have a unique role, for a number of reasons, and sometimes that's kind of the immediate. Typical siblings can be a great support for brother or sister with a disability, but also too, that's something that a lot of families in long-term planning say, when mom or dad are gone, we're gonna pass it on to you, or however you work that out. In our case, and again, I'm now remarried. We have not discussed the possibility of other children necessarily. So let's say that my son is the only child I have. Well, The reality is that my son has a severe disability and will never be independent.
Mhm.
So for me, I have to look at the realization that if that is my only child, that my kind of family line, or my arm of that family line or tree or whatever is going to stop with him,
Mm.
right? And that's hard because you often want to think about your child. First of all, your child growing up and going out into the world and making a life for themselves and having their own family and kids, and you become a grandparent or a great grandparent if you're lucky enough to see that. And in my case, I just may not have that, right?
Right.
And so the challenge is, because for a lot of the other dads and families that I know personally and work with, there are other kids involved. In some cases, there it might be an only child. I'm not the only one in that situation. But that is something that I know for myself. I've kind of had to let go, like, hey, listen, as much as you would like to be able to sit down and have dinner with your son, when he's 30 and, he's starting his own family, that's not going to happen.
Mhm.
But going back to my previous point about, okay, it's not going to look the same, but how do you make it work then? What I always go back to is this, and again, when you meet people who, as well-meaning as they are, they hear about your child, they hear about your situation, they listen to a story like this. Oh my goodness, like, we feel so bad for you. Like this is horrible. And I say, no, it's actually not. Because here's the thing. One, I have my child. My child is alive and healthy.
Right.
Developmentally, yes, he does struggle, but I have my child. He's alive. He's healthy. We have had so many wonderful experiences together. We continue to have great experiences together, trips and vacations and, hanging out and all of those things. And yeah, it does look different. But the other piece too is that when I think about my child having this disability, right? And I'm always careful when I communicate this because I'm in no way making this about me, right? But the fact is that it is because of my child that I was motivated to, again, not only find the resources for myself in terms of community and otherwise, but because of his disability, he motivated me to want to help others, to become a resource for others, to do all of these things creatively, whether it's writing or speaking or, podcasts like this or whatever. And I have met so many incredible people, other families touched by disability that are doing remarkable things in the world, right? So, I think about all of these folks that I never would have met, and just keep the whatever great organizations or ministries or whatever they have, keep that to the side. I have developed just genuinely great friendships with people I never would have met. And it's like one cute little story I like to tell. That dad that I started the support group with, back like 8 years ago, he and I developed a friendship and would hang out. And he's also divorced from his kid's mom. He has two sons with autism, but they're higher functioning. And his one son, I remember a few years ago, where I was living at the time, they do a big like October kind of a fest in our town, and him and his my friend and his son were going, and his son said, "Hey, can we meet with John and Chris since they're there? Boy, I'd really like to see them." And it's like, how amazing is that? It's not even my friend; it's my friend's kid saying, "Yeah, let's go see them."
Hmm.
Well, awesome. You know what? Because that's community right there. At,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, those friendships and relationships, they are the sweetest fruit out of anything. And again, I could count my blessings, looking back from where I started to now, it's a really long list, but those are the sweetest ones. When you make genuine, intentional friendships with people and connect with them, just because, yeah, you're having a shared experience, but you also genuinely love and care about each other.
That's beautiful. One of the things I'm a firm believer in is that each human being that God has created has weaknesses and limitations, every single one of us. And we also have something to contribute to the world and to one another. And I'm curious, we've talked some about the challenges and the limitations, but what has Chris taught you? What has he contributed to you? I know as a dad, you've taught him and you've contributed to him as well, but What has he taught you?
My son has made me a much kinder person.
Mm,
I always considered myself a good person, a nice person, whatever. But I was really never affected by disability. Even as an educator, I didn't teach special ed. I eventually wound up teaching special ed for a time. But it was just something that might be in my space kind of randomly, and I just didn't really pay it a lot of mind. Um, but now, because of my son's experience, and this is something that I do get very personal about, because as I mentioned again, he's an only child. The reality is that someday when dad's gone, mom's gone, stepmom's gone, all these people are gone, he's going to be alone.
mm,
He is. I mean, he'll have people taking care of him that, of course, we will orchestrate. But as it has been said to me, you can always pay people to care for your child, but you can't pay people to love them, right? So my fear is that I can't leave. I can't leave this world, this planet. I can't go on to my reward or, to the next place until I know that the world is a better place for him.
mm.
Right. And in that vein, I know it's made me much kinder, much more empathetic. He has allowed me to see people in all forms as having value. To create a world, to help create a world that I know I feel good about leaving to him when I'm gone, right? And that's a big task, and that's not just all about me, but I take it personally in that respect, and I think without having this experience, I don't know that I would see the world through the same lenses. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't. But because of that now, I can respond and relate to people in a way that definitely is different than I know I was, before I was a parent, and certainly when I was a younger man, and I totally may have just ignored all these things as opposed to saying, you know what, it's here, it's real. Can I do something, regardless of how small or big it is? But can I do something, right?
Yeah, to leave the world a better place for him and for others. And again, I just noticed that you could have gone the other direction. You could have just said, there's nothing I can do, or I'm just gonna take care of my son and not care about anybody else because this is plenty to have to figure out or to carry myself, right? But one of the things I'm noticing as I'm listening to your story is how, in a similar way that God cares for the world, for God so loved the world, you have found ways in the middle of your own story to not only care for yourself, which is important, and not only care for your son, for your family, but also to care for the world and want the world to be a better place. I really honor that.
Yeah, that means a lot. Thank you very much for saying that. And you know what, for me, I've just always believed as I've been on this journey that you know, I'm an instrument of God, and God is going to use me wherever He needs to. But the remarkable thing is that He equipped me for the work He had planned for me, and that's where I also say, whenever I give people advice, they say, "Hey, what's your best advice?" And I say, "Well, using my former teacher brain, I always say that advice is, number one A, number one B, right? One A for me is my faith. Without my Christian faith, I'm nothing. And here's where I will dip a little bit into the faith piece, because when
Please.
people mention all of the blessings that my son has given me, and I spoke to all of these experiences and people and relationships, at the end of the day, he led me to Jesus.
Mm,
And if that's all he did, if that was the only thing,
mm,
that would have been enough, right? That absolutely would have been enough.
yeah.
But God kept going.
Mm,
He kept going, and he said no. He said, now that you found me, now that you're with me, I've got work for you, right? And I've never shied away from that, because again, I knew what I didn't have, and I also could kind of very easily figure out so many other guys like me didn't have it either.
mhm.
So if he only led me to faith, that would be great. Because, and by the way, that number one A for me is faith. Number one B is community, right? And I often say this to people. I say, listen, wherever you're coming from listening to this, you may not be a Christian or a person of faith. Okay, fine. I'm not here to proselytize, but I am going to share my story and the truth of my story. But I'm also going to say that you must have community, because you cannot do it without community. If all I had was my faith coming out of this, boy, what a gift. But then, realizing, what I actually could do, that I could help. Once I actually got myself on a firm foundation, that was just an amazing gift, right? And it's something that, God continues to do.
I wonder if you could speak directly to parents of neurodivergent kids. And I am autistic ADHD, but I'm also a parent of neurodivergent kids. And I feel keenly this kind of loneliness you were alluding to at the beginning because I was diagnosed 2 years ago, a year and a half ago now. Um, and after my diagnosis, then other members of my family have gotten diagnosed. And there's not a lot of people around us. In fact, there's nobody right around us who actually understands neurodivergence or what it's like to be us in the world. So, if you were able to speak to parents of neurodivergent kids, especially those who might feel weary or unseen, what encouragement would you want to give them?
So what I would say first of all is the most important thing is that you can't do this alone. You absolutely cannot. And remember that while you may have family and friends that care about you, maybe you belong to a church community, or you have those supports in your neighborhood or kids' school or whatever. At the end of the day, you can't do this alone. Who is that person or people that you can lean into who are going to understand what you're experiencing in those really hard times and those really hard days? It's like I speak to about faith all the time. It's easy to have faith when the worst thing that happens to you is that you spill your coffee on the way to work, or somebody cuts you off, when you're
Right.
going to work, and whatever, and someone gives you a dirty look, and you just keep going, and okay, fine. It's hard to have faith in the real crises, as I've experienced with my son's disability, with divorce, with single parenting, with all of these things. But that is when you need it the most. And again, I would encourage anyone who is a person of faith, lean into your faith for sure, because that ultimately will be your foundation. But you need those people in your life speaking into your life, right? And that was also something that I learned very early on too, as I described my story, and I will use this time to speak to the other part of that parking lot story,
Yeah.
because the reality is that what I learned from that first episode all those years ago was the importance of community, and you could be part of a group and nobody gets you and nobody understands you or how to help you. And so over time, what I learned was, belonging to different churches, getting involved with men's groups, getting involved with, other support structures, small groups and Bible studies and all this. I learned a lot in terms of, how to create community, right? I plugged into healthy community. I got the support that I needed. And a lot of the things that I learned, quite honestly, were even just from those early years in terms of just having a healthy church and community experience. But where the community mattered for me then down the road was in the second part of that parking lot story I tell, which happened in 2019. And it was the day known as Black Friday. It's the day after Thanksgiving. It's the big retail shopping day, right?
Yeah.
And literally, you couldn't make this up, because it was on that day that, out of the blue, out of nowhere, no warning, my wife at the time, my son's mom, handed me divorce papers out of nowhere,
Mm.
right? Didn't expect it. We weren't fighting or anything. It's just, don't love you anymore. Here you go.
Wow.
Okay, now what? Now I happen to be, I was home at the time. my wife, my now ex, left the home. My son, I think, was with a family friend, so I was just kind of by myself, and I'm thinking, I'm going to go nuts here. What do I do?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I just have to get in the car and drive. So I drove to a local like retail big box store kind of a thing. And I sat in the car in the parking lot just like I had did all those years ago. But here was the difference this time. This time I had a million people to call.
Mm.
And I had friends I could call, many of whom were also special needs dads, some who were also divorced.
Wow.
I the first guy I actually called, believe it or not, was a guy who was a special needs attorney, also a special needs dad, and also divorced. So
Wow.
there you go. That was a nice trifecta there. So, you know, but again, reaching out to other parents who, you know, or dads who are in the same boat as me or had the same experiences, reaching out to my, you know, other disability ministry friends, you know, faith community, you know, pastors, all of that. I had people I could lean into, and I'm still kind of amazed at how many people actually showed up in that season of life for me. Like when I really look at it, it just blows me away. But again, that couldn't have happened unless I had identified what I was missing and intentionally sought it out and built into it and not only plugged into it where it existed, but then also created it where I felt that there was a need or something that could be done and lean into other people. And again, be a support for them, be a resource for them. Because when I needed them, they were there for me. Right. And so that's why I always encourage parents, please don't do this alone. And again, it doesn't take 50 people, it doesn't take 10. Start with one. Start with that person in your community, in your neighborhood, your son's school. Maybe think about joining a group, or maybe even think about starting a group. But even if you don't, right, get that community because the other thing is that it's also going to make sure that you have a sounding board for things because if it's just bottled up in the home, then mom and dad are going to very easily take it out on each other or take it out on the child directly or indirectly.
Sure.
You don't want that. Right. So this is for me, this is the kind of fireproofing that you can do as a family of disability that can make all the difference for you.
Mm. Thank you for that. How can people get in touch with you and or any resources that you might recommend? You're very connected to a lot of different things. So are there any resources you would recommend? And then also, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so there are a lot of great things I'm connected with. I won't give you a whole laundry list, but a couple of organizations that I always like to mention, and specifically for special needs dads, okay? Because believe it or not, there are organizations and ministries that just focus on dads, okay? So the one that I always plug is called Special Fathers Network. Special Fathers Network. It's based in Chicago, but it's a national organization. They offer so many resources and support for dads. They have a mentoring program where you can get connected with a dad either in your area or even if it's, you know, virtually, whatever, get connected with a mentor dad that can kind of coach you and work with you. If you like a group dynamic, they do what are known as mastermind groups, which are basically virtual support groups, and it's guys from all over the country. So you can either get plugged into, there are some parts of the country where they have their own kind of dedicated groups, or you can join one of the bigger national groups and get connected with guys from everywhere. But there's a great series of YouTube videos, excellent podcasts, tons of resources. There's a virtual conference every year, and then there's a dad's retreat every year. That the last couple of years has at least been in Chicago, but I know we've moved it around as well. So that's an excellent organization. Rising Above Ministries, my friend Steve Chapman and Becky Davidson, who run that. That's an excellent organization for special needs moms and dads. Again, with the faith focus. I know that Steve does run again virtual support groups for dads as well. So if you want to get plugged into that, and I think they also now have a podcast, but then they also have, you know, small group studies, Bible studies, that type of thing, and again, kind of through this lens of disability. So I definitely suggest them. Otherwise, definitely if you are again, especially if you're a person of faith, and especially if you don't have a church home or if your church doesn't support disability or disability families, you know, I always plug organizations like Key Ministry, KUI Key Ministry out of Ohio, which is a treasure trove of information and resources on how to find support. You know, pretty much everybody who's in this disability ministry world works with Key Ministry on some level. Another great one is Ability Ministry. Likewise, they have excellent resources for churches and just providing curriculums and just other ways that you can kind of get plugged into your own church. So they're another wonderful organization. And of course, Johnny and Friends, which is an organization. It's a global ministry that I used to work for locally here in Chicago. It is an excellent organization. They do family retreats for families of disability. We've attended for years ourselves. And they also support churches in doing training for disability programs as well. And that's specifically something that I had done. So those are some great ministries and organizations I highly encourage people to check out. If you'd like to find me, I often joke you can just punch my name into the Google machine and you'll find me. I do have a website. It's just myname.com, johnfella.com. You can kind of see a lot of my different content, resources, that type of thing there. I will tell you that I do tend to produce a lot of stuff pretty regularly. So the freshest stuff isn't always up there. So definitely check me out on social media. I'm on Facebook. I have a dedicated Facebook page, John Special Needs Blog on Facebook, John Special Needs Blog. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, X. Just punch my name in, you'll find me. I will also plug quickly that I do have a couple of books coming out in the next several months.
All right.
One I'm very excited about, which is my memoir, Faith Like My Father. It is my memoir of being a special needs dad. A lot of the things that we've shared today and also a whole lot more will be in that book. So that should be coming out by the end of the year. And then another book that I contributed to actually with Stephanie, that she's actually doing with Temple Grandin, for those who know that name. But that's going to be an excellent book. It's actually going to be a resource for educators and therapists. And I got to contribute to that one as well. So very excited about that. So if you're interested in any of these things, or if you just have a question or just need someone to connect with, please feel free to reach out to me on any of those platforms. I'm happy to connect with you.
Thank you. And we'll put links to those things in the show notes. John, I just want to thank you for sharing so openly. I want to thank you for your bravery, for your generosity. And I just see how you embraced the story that God was writing for you, and in it found more of a calling for yourself and a community that you would have never gone looking for, a savior you would have never gone looking for. Just really beautiful to take in your story today. So thanks for sharing it with us.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Josh.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Neurodivergent Faith. If you like what you heard, consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing this with someone who might need to hear it too. And as you continue to wrestle with faith and identity, remember, your unique brain is a part of God's creative genius. Whether it's the way you process scripture, engage with prayer, or connect with others, you are a reflection of the vast creativity of our Creator. May you trust that God knows you, delights in you, and is working in you exactly as you are. And may you know that you are not walking this journey alone. See you next time.